Fabulous with Vips and Vicky. The Thinqshift podcast for professionals who aspire to be fabulous leaders. Those who not only succeed, but also purposefully seek to reinvent the world.
Welcome to the Be Fabulous podcast, episode 11, The Thinqshift Why. In this episode, we bring together, taking our lead from the Vips Why and the Vicky Why, we bring it together into why Thinqshift? Why does it exist? Why do we believe fabulous leaders are so important? And what are we doing at an individual level and an organizational level that is different and hopefully will result in better leaders to reinvent the world as we go forward.
Welcome to our Be Fabulous podcast. In this series, we are at episode 3 after 2 episodes focusing in on the Vicky Why and the Vips Why. So in this episode, we are going to cover Thinqshift and what is the Thinqshift Why. So as you've heard from us individually, we are now going to pull this all together and talk about why does Thinqshift exist and what do we hope to achieve at the individual and the organizational level. So with Vips, with that as the backdrop, what's this all about? What is the Thinqshift Why all about?
That sounded so formal when we introduced it that way, wasn't it? I was saying to myself, "Wow, we sound really well put together." I think
we punch above our weight, my friend.
We do punch above our weight. And one might argue we don't punch high enough above our weight.
That too.
I look at its core. I think probably the best place to start is probably just worthwhile just decomposing kind of our mission, I guess, and because I think it's pretty loaded in there, and then we can kind of decompose down at the individual level and organizational level. But at its core, we're in the business, we exist to craft fabulous people and fabulous leaders to reinvent the world. And that doesn't happen if people just kind of plod along doing whatever it is that they're doing. That takes a certain type of character, certain type of craft and skill that needs to be honed over many years. It takes the ability to adapt, pivot, build teams, in our case, typically against the business backdrop, but not exclusively against the business backdrop. And what we're really trying to do is, in my opinion, and I'll be curious to hear how you interpret this or how you expound on this. I think we have a very optimistic and positive view on the future of what the world could be, whether it's our organizations and maybe a focus a little bit more across profit, people, and planet, as opposed to maybe just profit, as we see in so many companies that we work with. But also fundamentally that, over time, over decades, over generations, things do generally at some level tend to move towards some level of progress, even if we have lapses along the way. And so what I want to do really from a Thinqshift Why point of view is try to accelerate some of that fabulous. So we create a better generation of leader in the future, so we don't have this kind of skill shortage, capacity shortage of good leadership talent for some of the challenges that we experience both in our organizations, in our communities, in our countries, and globally. That's probably where I would start. Curious for your reactions to that.
For me, what I see is a lot of organizations make it up, right? They start with a great idea and they take the first few steps and they hire some people and they try and make it in whatever way they can without any deliberate thought as to the construct of what they're building and the impact later on them and the world. And what that tends to mean is over time, the type of people they hire may or may not work out. They may be okay the early days, further down the line, they may not be the right individuals. The behaviors, the ways of operating might not be appropriate for what they're trying to achieve. And so when I think about the Thinqshift why is we have, through all our experiences and all the research that's out there, we found a way to be able to architect and create the foundations for organizations that help it truly be in the place where it is considering profit, people, and planet, and not over-skewing on any one, and then take it relative to their size. And if you do that well from the beginning, it's much less painful later on, because once you end up 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the line with a certain way of behaving, that becomes the culture. And it's much harder then to unwind all of that. And often, 10, 15, 20 years, 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, you now have an institution and a way of being that is very, very difficult to shift. And so fundamentally, if we can get back to let's thoughtfully do it while we're scrambling to make money, that would be very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite multifaceted, right? When you think about it that way. I was making some show notes before this one, and I think I drill it down to, fundamentally, I think if you look at the Thinqshift why through the lens of what are we reacting against, then I would say, we're reacting against the idea that we see so many executives and so few leaders. When you look around you, there's just not that many people that you'd follow, but yet everyone and his uncle seems to have a VP or SVP or GVP title. And what does that mean anymore? So that, to me, I think we're a bit of a reaction to that. There's almost a little bit of a desire to refocus back on what constitutes people and causes that we want to follow, as opposed to the tactics that we have to employ in order to operate effectively or efficiently. I think it's a slightly different. One's maybe more of a management orientation, and one is a little bit more of a leadership orientation. And even though they overlap massively, I think if you're looking to do something positive in the world, or shift a culture, or shift a mindset, or create any kind of lasting change, you kind of need to skew a little bit more towards leadership and a little bit less towards management. You need both, but that's probably the skew.
So Vips on that point, when we think about too many executives and too few leaders, how many do you think are self-aware of the difference between those things? And what do you think that's all about?
Here's what I think. I think this is one of those things that instinctively most people know it when they see it. Yeah. But I think that most people would like to think they are leaders rather than executives.
And that's a lot of because of the way we talk about leaders.
That's correct.
Everybody's a leader in some shape or form. They're leading something. But we have a very particular definition of needing followership to be a true leader.
Yeah, but it's not just us. I mean, you got to remember that to some extent, business has perverted the term leader. I mean, society really in the last sort of 20, 30 years has really, I don't know, it's sort of fudged those two things into one. If you're a senior person in our company, then you must be a leader. And I think we kind of got away from the core of what constitutes a way of being that generates followership and authenticity versus what makes you a leader because you've got some skills in doing something and you can do those things really, really well. So we'll just call you a leader because we want to pay you $300,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to belittle it, but I think what's happened is, and then what we've done is what we always do is we then end up stratifying leaders. So you don't mean a thought leader. You don't mean this type of leader. You don't mean that type of leader. You mean an expert. You mean, so what happens is, that kind of phrase, the phrase leader can be contorted quite easily to fit most situations. And I think what happens then is that gets lost. We tend to promote and over-promote people who we think have skills that we think, fall within some pattern or some framework or some role that we want them to play. And it's kind of easier to let people off the hook when it comes to the more self-reflective, character-intrinsic, quite frankly, applying the right value judgments when data is ambiguous, against the value system, that's when you have to make leadership calls. When you can't just rely on the mechanics and the data. It's really taking a stand at some level for something that you believe in, and then engendering that or sort of inculcating that inside of your organization. And I think what I see really, now that you asked me that question, is I think you see leadership quite a lot with the people that have really made it, because they realize what it is. Like after the first time they've done it, it's almost like you reflect back, and with hindsight, you get to see what was leadership and what was management. But I think when you're on that journey, it's really easy to see the things that people are doing, attribute them to good management skills. And so you don't really make that distinction until after you've kind of made it, if you like. And so, you create this this layer of people that maybe sit just below the true leaders inside an organization, where they're no longer really playing to advance a cause or a mission or a purpose or a sense of being, but they're kind of just trying not to get found out and maintain their income, maintain their lifestyle, maintain their jobs, because, well, I guess why wouldn't you? They recognize the privileged position they're in.
So the imposter syndrome creeps in again.
Yeah. Well, some it's not even imposter. Some they just know it. It's like, well, I'll just ride it out for as long as I can until I get found out.
And this is where the ego is a little tricky character.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the ego doesn't often allow us to acknowledge to others that we aren't truly playing the role we are in place to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we know one leader, Vips, or one executive who, will categorically say, I'm never wrong. We're going to do this. You may not understand it, but I'm just never wrong. So don't come back and tell me. Now you can imagine what kind of environment that creates. When that's the posture, but it also reinforces his or her belief that they're never wrong.
That's right. And that kind of personality is often very good at just forgetting whenever they were wrong. They won't even have the memory recall for that. So they only have the memory recall for anything that did work. And so in their heads, their statistics show that, 99% of the times I'm right, 1% I'm wrong, but I only make 10 decisions a year. So I'm always right.
I also had this wonderful discussion once with a very seasoned CEO, and he made this statement, which I thought was very wise, is I try not to do anything significant in my first year, because what I've learned is, through all my experiences, the first year of making changes in an organization, when you come in from the outside, you think you know, but you don't really know. You're pattern matching based on what you did before, but it's the nuances of the culture which makes change so hard. And it's really year two when you get it right. Now you start again. You understand the landmines, you understand the layers, the unsaid beliefs and principles and philosophies of what is or isn't going to make that change work. And I thought that was a very profound way to see the world. And if only a lot of leaders could see that, because too many will go into organizations, they come in to make a change, something happens, and within 90 days, there's a reorg, there's something that goes on. But to everybody else around the edges, it doesn't feel good at all. And so the consequences, what I really wanted to touch on is too many executives, too few leaders. What is the consequence from your perspective? And then I'll share mine, Vips, on organizations in the world.
The consequence on the organizations?
Yeah.
Oh, I think what it means is the consequences are enormous. So firstly, I think what then happens is basically organizations just do what they've always done. And how one then thinks of change, how one thinks of innovation, how one thinks of new products, new services is all really incremental tweaks. And but yet, you'll massively wrap it up in marketing and language and so forth to try to convince yourself that you're being revolutionary, innovative, changing to the market, adapting, so forth and so forth and so forth. So, but what you're really doing is relatively small incremental changes. And I think what that does over time is it leaves you susceptible to new entrants in the marketplace. And, someone smaller, more nimble, more agile, usually with a younger demographic as well, comes and takes your cheese. And, in today's world, we call that disruptors, right? We fetishize the disruptor. I think that's what it does when you have too few execs and too few leaders, particularly in larger or established organizations.
Yeah. And then internally in the organization, what we see is there's disruption to the individuals. So they don't feel like they have the space to grow. They don't feel like they're being stretched. They don't feel valued. They don't feel necessarily that their voice is always heard.
Yeah.
So they
well, I think it systemically creates mediocrity, Vicky.
learned helplessness,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Where you do the bare minimum, and it's all the things that executives hate. They don't want mediocrity or people doing the bare minimum, and they don't realize the consequence of how they show up and the resulting effect.
But there's a truism there, right? Everyone wants everyone else to change. They want to change themselves. Right? It's like, they're the problem, not me. But you're right. As you were speaking, your little test there about that executive you're talking to and working with, I use that as a self-efficacy test because, here's how it shows up. So anyone who's got high levels of self-efficacy knows that they're going to be valuable, therefore doesn't mind fighting for and holding the course of not really doing anything in that first 6, 9, 10, 12 months, recognizing that I need to spend more time listening and absorbing so that I know which levers to pull in subsequent years. Otherwise, I've got a high probability that I do the wrong things.
And building relationships. Agreed?
Yeah. Now, here's how it shows up, though, in organizations that have low self-efficacy or leaders, people who think they're leaders but are probably executives with low self-efficacy. What's my 30-day plan? What's my 60-day plan? I need to get some quick wins. What's my 100-day plan? If I don't do these things, they're going to think I'm not adding any value. You heard that one?
Oh, yeah.
Right? That, to me, is the test right there. Yeah? If you go into an organization and either the organization expects you to make radical changes in 30, 60, 90 days, or you believe that you're going to get found out unless you do those things in the 30, 60, 90 days, one is an indicator of low individual self-efficacy, and one is of in our language, it would be a non-fabulous culture. Yeah.
So Vips, what do you do in that situation? If you come into an organization and that's the case, what do you do in there?
Well, as a fabulous leader or as an executive?
As a fabulous leader.
Well, you probably wouldn't join. You'd probably go somewhere else.
But say you've joined and then you find,
You discover it while you're there.
Because you know what it's like. You're dating, you're having a grand old time. There's the champagne, you're being wooed, you're wooing.
All right, so you're sleeping together, but you haven't got married yet.
That's it. Now you get in the door and you start lifting up the rocks and you're seeing...
It's a bit ugly down there.
It's way ugly down there. And no one ever told you that. And you knew it was going to be kind of ugly, but you never knew how ugly.
Yeah. I think what I would do in that scenario and what I coach people to do in that scenario is, okay, so you're experiencing now that the environment is different from the one that you thought you were joining. So I would help them put together a plan of how are they going to learn the nuances of that environment as quickly as possible. So I would then turn, so if you have to have a 90-day or 180-day plan, I would make that more about understanding different departments, understanding how they work, where do responsibility domains fall from a departmental point of view. When I think of my peer group, how do I build those relationships? How do I build my, it's almost like LinkedIn. How do I build my tentacles inside an organization, but see those as milestones rather than see those as the things I have to do above and beyond my job, so to speak. And then I also think from a competency point of view, this is where, we have I guess, many readers listeners won't know, but, we do a lot on killer questions, asking great questions. I think this is when that period of 3-6 months, asking the great questions that don't force you into a place where you're going to have to make decisions that could come back and bite you unnecessarily. So to me, a big tons, do a few things, do them really, really well, and be double down on getting to know that environment, and not feel too frustrated if you feel like you're not making as much progress as you would like quickly.
Yeah, and I like the killer questions, and I would add to that, through what you're learning through those killer questions and building those relationships, breadcrumbing and drip feeding that knowledge across the organization in different ways so that people start to say, wow, that new leader is adding incredible value by giving me these insights that I hadn't yet seen, because I hadn't yet seen my lens of my world through the lens of another department. So that way you're buying yourself time. You're not only spending time building relationships, but you're building that capital with the other people where they feel like you're adding significant value through how you are joining the dots for them that they may not have seen before.
Yeah. And you know what that is at its core? We actually have to do an episode on this specifically, but those people will recognize and associate with high levels of value personal power. Yeah. Those executives who disproportionately associate themselves with content power, they're the ones who are going to feel like they're not doing enough.
Yeah.
Because their association of value is tied to, if you're a CIO, if you're a CIO and your association of value is managing technical teams or technical departments, okay, and that's you think that's your thing, technology is your thing, it's content power centric, then you are likely to think that all those things I described earlier are not really what your job is, because you associate your job being more with your content power. And so to me, that's also a really good indicator of when someone is really just an executive as opposed to a great leader.
So Vibs, let me ask you this, of all the people you're working with, and I'll do the same, how many are truly seeing their world through the lens of other departments, as opposed to looking inward and protecting the boundaries of their castle and playing the political game? Because if you think about it, every department, you brought up the example of technology, but if you think about marketing or product or supply chain or R&D or finance or people, they're all there to support each other and to deliver the greater whole of whatever the vision is and the mission of the organization. So anyone working on their own is not helpful. But in order to look through the lens of, if we go back to the example of technology, I'm only here to serve those that are delivering content or product to our customers. It's a means to an end. But how many really see it that way, as opposed to, I have a significant budget, I have probably one of the largest headcounts in the organization, because of the role technology plays these days. But am I really looking at it as, I'm here to serve, as opposed to, here's my kingdom, here's my walls, everything's so complicated, and I look inwards and I defend?
So in raw numbers, you're asking me?
No, just generally. Can you think of percentages?
I think that's a journey of endurance and suffering. Right? Like I think you have to go through that kind of, I'm looking after my little fiefdom, and realize it doesn't work for you. Like there's a limit to how well that can work for you before it starts basically getting in the way of where the organization is fundamentally going, and you start being an inhibitor to where the organization is going, rather than kind of someone who is actively serving the mission, if you like.
And that's when ego kicks in again, because many won't acknowledge that and go, "Oops, that's not working for me. Let me change it up."
Yeah, but they do it when they lose their jobs a couple of times. Right? And I think that's the key. I think
that's painful. That's a lot to go through. It's really painful.
It is. And I mean, this is why I'm such a fan of tours of duty for your fabulous people, because I think if you don't do that, what actually happens is that people, if you just allow that functional career path to just continue, you are going to end up with the Peter principle playing out, where you will rise to a level of incompetence.
So tours of duty, explain that for our listeners.
Yeah, so tours of duty is basically the idea that, when you've we just need to get much better at identifying fabulous talent. And by that, I just mean people who have the potential to be great leaders above and beyond being good managers and executives. Okay. And that's not the same as, this person's doing a really good job right now, therefore they're in my top right-hand corner of my 9 box from an HR point of view. So these are people that
they don't fit the 9 box.
They don't fit the 9. They're probably in some other 9 box in another dimension, if you like. And with these people, they're not just saying they want to grow and they want to learn, but they're actually going to make decisions on that basis. They're going to they're going to find a way to take matters into their own hand by leaving, or they're comfortable with the idea that if I need to acquire a breadth of skills, then maybe that's not the shortest path to wealth.
Going horizontally for a while.
Yeah. I might have to go horizontal to then go up, or I may have to, do a tour of duty in a different department to truly understand what it feels like to be in there, so that when I'm a COO or a CFO or a CEO or a CPO, I'll be able to relate and understand that better. But to do that is often means a short-term foregoing of a particular, maybe upward promotion, if you like, from within your domain. And I think tours of duty are a mechanism. They're a systemic, they're a structural thing that I think we used to do these a lot, 30, 40 years ago, and we stopped doing them because we started optimizing for kind of really efficiency, and a lot of the slack in the machine got taken away with high levels of efficiency. But now what happens is it's very difficult to keep your best talent, particularly your best leadership talent. So tours of duty are really a way to make sure that your best people are being optimized for growth and learning over the long term, rather than, short-term results of their job this quarter or this 6 months. But you have to want that. You have to create a culture and environment that promotes and advocates that.
Well, sure, because if you think about those that value content power, it feels awfully risky when you bring somebody into your area to lead it that has no content power.
Sure.
So you bring a CIO, CTO into head up marketing. The marketing folk look up and think, who's this person? They've got
but maybe that person who could be a CIO in a small or medium-sized organization takes a sideward step, and they're a director in marketing rather than the C member, right? So, to me, this comes back to self-awareness and self-efficacy again. It's a question of, what are you conditioning and training for? Are you conditioning and training for the path of least resistance, which is going to be your functional career path? Or are you conditioning and toning to be a leader of some kind of organization or cause in the future? In which case, your optimization algorithms look different. They don't look like the path of least resistance for the promotion. Mm. Yeah. But this is where I think HR departments and talent departments can often go wrong, because we kind of get fixated on the idea of doing the same thing for everyone. And that kind of feels like fairness. Yeah, there's a fairness aspect to that. And I think when we try to create fairness in systems, it tends to look like do the same thing for everyone.
Yeah.
And the problem is everyone's a little bit different because of their aspirations, their backgrounds, their skills, their horsepower, whatever criteria you want to throw at it. And so I think we need to move to a world where we are comfortable with the idea that we're doing different things for different people, because that's what's going to optimize their level of growth and therefore the value return to the business, rather than we can't do it that way, because if we do it that way for this person, then we have to do it that way for everyone, which is generally, I think, the default mentality that particularly our talent structures and systems tend to fall into.
It's making me think of a story I heard at a TEDx event in Seattle from a prosecutor who had two people come and see him. One was a tech worker from Seattle, and one was an undocumented worker. And he had to prosecute both of them for drinking and driving. And he gave the description of, if he gives them both a slap on the wrist, a $500 fine, and a night in jail, for the tech worker who's earning a lot of money, that literally feels like a slap on the wrist, even that penalty. But for the undocumented worker, that could be life-changing. He could end up going back to, or she go back to wherever they came from. So it might be, on the surface, it might feel equal, but is it equitable? And I thought that was a very good distinction between those concepts of how do you, in this instance, have the punishment feel the right way to the individual. In tours of duty or things inside organizations, it's how do you take care of people so that those fabulous few are truly being taken care of in a meaningful way, just as meaningfully as those that are more your steady eddies, and that you're okay with that. And
it's okay. I think that's we struggle with that. I mean, you talked about it through the lens. That's something. Your example. I just want to do a bit of a segue here or a sidebar, I should say, because I went through the same thing when I was here and I wasn't a citizen at that point. I was on a visa at the time. I forgot to update my tags on my car, and the reason why was because the car was paid for by the company, and so I didn't even realize that the tag had run out because it wasn't coming to me; it was going to the organization, and I got stopped. And Carla was, I think, about 8 months pregnant at the time, I mean, we basically. They took the car and we ended up having to get a taxi back and what have you. But we had to go to court, or I had to go to court. And it was really interesting because, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered. We would have gone back to England. But you're exactly right. The consequence of it wasn't just a $50 fine or $100 fine or $200 fine. It was, you will show up in court. And if you're convicted of this, your visa will be revoked. Yeah. That's a lot of pressure on forgetting to update your tags. Yeah, that you wouldn't have, for example. Well, I don't have now as a US citizen. Yeah.
That is a very good example of that.
Yeah, but if I take you to a different place, you also. I think we talk about we especially right now we're trying to wrap our heads around equity and equality, and those words are becoming words that are not just there for philosophers and academics anymore. They've found their way into corporate language as well, particularly against the backdrop of what we're going through in the world right now. And the phrase that we used to hear about a lot in the UK when we were studying, I don't know if this is, I just don't know if I'm not exposed to it so much in the US, was we used to talk a lot more about equality of opportunity as opposed to like raw equality, which means, so equality was more like just treat everyone the same, done, yeah? And equality of opportunity was really recognizing that for any given opportunity, some people are going to have some privilege associated with that, and some are going to have less privilege associated with that. And this could be getting into college, going to certain colleges. There was a preference. I don't know if it still exists, but certainly when I was growing up, if you had a father or a mother that went to that college, you would automatically have preference when it came to acceptance because you're an alumni. You have a parental alumni. But if you think about it, that was discriminating against someone else who could have had that, who might have been a better candidate. So there was this idea that, so in that scenario, if you want equality of opportunity against a more diverse pool, then some of that privilege has to be taken away, and it manifests itself in those policies. But the idea is basically that, equal for one person, equality of opportunity for one person is different from equality of opportunity from someone else because their context is either less or more privileged relative to that topic.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, and I know as we go into this topic, given its prevalence in society today, importantly, it's going to be interesting to see what that means for things like white privilege. But that takes us off topic, so let's get us back on topic.
But I think where it brings to is fundamentally we also exist because we know that the world needs better leaders to deal with huge challenges of the world. And when we started this 6 years ago, the kinds of things I was thinking about more were, sustainability, climate change, just rising populations across the world, sort of changing economic landscape across countries. I mean, I think it was around the time that I started becoming a little bit concerned that, I don't know if we can be the largest debtor nation forever, as the US, So, that's before you layer on, social justice, what I would describe as, maybe a more progressive agenda. All of these are hard, complex, systemic, cultural. Sometimes they cross political lines. Sometimes they cross religious lines. Sometimes they cross, national lines. And this was also against the backdrop of globalization, which obviously has slightly fallen out of favor in recent years. But either way, however you look at it, these challenges, there's no way that we can do those just by worrying about our own little piddly departments inside our organizations. I mean, these are, and quite frankly, I don't think the younger generation want that. They want to be part of that narrative. They want to be part of that solution. They kind of recognize that we've screwed up the world, my age and above, if you like. kind of screwed up the world that they're about to inherit. And it's like, there's a reason why they're angry. But that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, there's hundreds of years of wisdom that we've accumulated. And, we are going to need, really strong and more voluminous quality leadership over the next 50, 60 years, just because of the scale of the challenges that we're going to have as a species.
So we're going to end up with fabulous leaders who create organizations that are purposeful and care about people, profit, and planet.
I think it's inevitable, but the problem with those things is it's, for that to happen, that kind of culture shift doesn't happen as a result of a project or a program. That's
why so many transformations fail.
It's sustained. Yeah, that's right. 87% of them, which is, by the way, a phenomenal sum of money that gets spent on business transformation.
All good intention.
All good intention, but that's you've also taken us to another reason why Thinqshift why exists. We realized that you and I have been doing this for 20 years plus, and they just don't work unless the mindsets and the behaviors of our leaders and key influencers change to reflect where we're going as opposed to where we've been.
Well, there's that need for that common view of where are we going, and then a common language and framework for how do we see the world when we think about
Sure.
people, profit, and planet, and how to not look inward and just take care of myself, but take care of my team.
Sure.
And that takes a significant rewiring. The question.
And courage.
And courage, because the question, I love to ask a lot of my clients is if, we look ahead 5 years, we're all going to pretty much be exactly where we are to plus or minus 5%. And there's something in our vision shifts in terms of where we want to go. And we want to do that hockey stick. If we map out 5 years ahead, 5 years behind, unless you fundamentally shift how you see things, you pretty much can guarantee you're going to be where you're going to be plus or minus 5%. And so if you think about that from an organizational perspective, if you're not all creating a common language and way of being around all of this, you're going to continue with the dysfunction that we see today and all these executives and so few leaders. And we won't have organizations that are as purposeful and caring about people, profit, and planet as we need.
Yeah. I mean, I bring it back to just straight up cognitive science. I mean, just our brains just want to be in autopilot most of the time.
Well, that's what they feel safe.
So yeah. So if that's what, if that's the wiring that's required for people to feel safe and comfortable, and I've yet to meet someone who doesn't want to work less, earn more money, and do what they're doing today, right? There is a certain amount of why can't things just be easier? And if you think about what easier actually means from a cognitive point of view, it means it means doing more of my defaults.
And it's why so many people have enjoyed at least this part of the COVID, which is
right.
The non-commute, not commuting. I mean, there've been some other
right.
downsides, but the amount of upside of not commuting has been huge for folks.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine if you've been given 4 hours of your each day back,
and add in all the distractions, especially for a lot of introverts that work in organizations. From an energy perspective, It's huge.
Yeah. So guess what? It's going to, in some respects, for those people, it's going to feel way more comfortable. They won't want to let it go. But does that mean that they are now going to maximize their potential and grow and become fabulous leaders of the future? No, maybe it's bad from that point of view, because you're not going to be in more complex, influencing type of conversations because you're too busy getting stuff done over Slack in short posts. Maybe you just avoid directional and vision-centric stuff because there's no right or wrong answer for that kind of stuff. It's value, judgment, choice, and inspiration in many cases. Those things are notoriously hard to build without direct human contact. So, what we're doing really as we're having this podcast, Vicky, is we're almost dissecting the Thinqshift why against the levels of thinking that we've been doing in previous episodes.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, all of these things, everything that we feel good about, like that quintessential software developer who's introverted, who loves being at home right now, and without the commute and everything else, there is a consequence to that if you go higher up the thinking levels.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And but if it conforms more to our own internal wiring and beliefs, then what gives us the least amount of friction cognitively, then it feels easier. If it feels easier, your brain's getting positive reinforcement. You will not change that. In fact, you might leave your current job that might be the best place for you to grow just because you don't really want that growth.
To seek safety.
You want what you have now because it's easy.
Yeah. I've had that example with one of my chef clients who's opening a new restaurant this week, and I'm so proud of her because this is a tough time to open a restaurant. But one of her team was offered the opportunity to lead that particular new restaurant, but it would require a huge step up, a different demographic, different market segment, a whole nother level of polish required. And after having a few coaching sessions and digging into what it really means, very proud of her, she made the decision that she doesn't want it. Rather than trying to do something that would challenge her. And for me, it's always striking because I'm like, doesn't everybody want to grow? Doesn't everybody want to take on that challenge and reach their potential? Because that's how I am. But at the same time, I'm really proud of people when they say, you know what, that's too much like hard work for me. I'm happy for growth, but not that level of growth. It has to be more in my comfort zone. So
I know you want to switch, but I think that's really fascinating what you just said, because I think it talks to some like, if you think about what we've done from a Thinqshift point of view, we have absolutely not tried to grow fast. Mm-hmm. I mean, as an organization.
Yeah.
We could have been 3-4 times bigger than we are today. But if you're optimizing for doing meaningful work, and you doing the sorts of work you want to do, me doing the sorts of work I want to do, so that we are working towards a mission, that sometimes isn't the fastest path to organizational growth.
Yeah, that's a good insight.
So we make those choices, but I think it's hard to do that when you get large, when you have, particularly if you've got, your VC backed or private equity backed, or a listed company where you've got, very entrenched behaviors on what a board is supposed to do, what they care about. It's really about financial duty of care and obligation, risk management. And these are not bad things, because they're employing so many more people. They are, but it's, shifting those things is really, really difficult, because it's not like the world isn't competitive. It's quite hard. So, what we're talking about is making a hard problem for business leaders even harder. And many aren't up for that.
So it leads me to our final question as we look to end this particular episode. So, Vips, is it really possible from your perspective, when you think about your clients, and I'll give my perspective as well, to be happy, successful, purposeful, with limited tension at the same time? Is that really even possible? Do you have examples of that where...
I do. I have many examples of that. And what I've now found is it tends to be the people who get close to that tend to be on that journey. If we take our 4 journeys, the journey to superstar performer, the journey to awesome manager, the journey to top-notch executive, and the journey to fabulous leadership, they tend to be in that journey to fabulous leadership area, like the ones that I can think of.
They've got through their circles of suck.
They've got through their circles of suck, or they've decided as superstar performers that they simply don't want to do anything else. They're happy being superstar performers.
So they've decided how they want to be in the world, and they've come to terms with that.
Correct. So for example, if you take a superstar performer, it's like, I'm not going to chase the promotion, I'm not going to chase the big team, I'm not going to chase the big budgets, but I am going to hone my skills to become better and better at my craft, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I've got a great example of that one, where I had someone in that case, and they said, I'm going to spend my little extra time, rather than chasing promotion, working with my son on robotics and building something in robotics, because that's what I love.
Yeah. But they're also making a conscious decision then that my economic value to the market will be a function of the value of the skills at a point in time. The reason why we like, quote unquote, climbing the ladder is because your income levels and income growth are relatively predictable and safe. So if you kind of jump off that path and just focus on your craft, then you're more likely to have a variable income profile over the course of your professional life, because the value of your skills is going to increase and decrease based on on its level of relevance and relative supply and demand in the marketplace, which is why you tend to see those people more in contract type roles.
Yeah, that's a good self-selection perspective as well.
So yeah, I do think you can. And the reason why I think it tends to happen is at a later stage, or on that final journey, if you like, is I think people have to realize, like, when I remember when I was 22, right? And I was so happy to join Anderson. I was thinking about the money I'm going to be earning and what have you. I'm going to have my BMW. Life's going to be wonderful. I'll be so happy. And then within 2 weeks of buying my BMW, it's like I got buyer's remorse. I'm going to do like 1,000 miles a year because I live in central London. This is stupid. Yeah. But if you tried to convince me beforehand that the BMW wouldn't have made me happy, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah. Well, it's often the case that you'll hear billionaires say that,
Yeah.
which is hard to believe. You're chasing all this success and you're climbing this ladder, but you realize the ladder's on the wrong wall. It's not the wall that actually makes you happy when you get to the top. How many times have we ever heard that?
The phrase I've been using recently, Vicky, and you'll have a repulsive reaction to this, because you're the chief happiness officer, right? But I've started talking about engineering suffering. I don't mean in a nasty way. I mean like in order to have someone accelerate their growth, there has to be periods that build resilience and don't go right, don't go well, aren't happy, are a bit sad.
Yeah, because that's the time you grow the most.
That's when you grow the most. Now, you don't want them, you don't want them crashing and burning and left in emotional distress that it's going to take 5 years for them to recover, right? It has to be tempered. But I think somewhere along the line, we've started saying that creating a supportive environment and one that cares is one that isn't creating the learning opportunities because somehow you're not caring if I'm having a hard time at the moment. And there's a real fine line there between being supportive and helpful at the cost of not giving you the experiences you're going to need later on in your career to mentor, guide, but also to make the difficult decisions you have to make as you become more senior. Or in your life, right? Just say you have kids and you don't want to work that hard, but you're addicted to whatever job you've got. I mean, these are difficult decisions. And if you don't have the reps along the way for a little bit of suffering associated with some of those decisions earlier on, you're going to fall hard if you've never had them before and you're doing them at senior levels.
Okay. So I think that takes us full circle, Vips, to our Thinqshift why. Individually, organizationally, it's so important to have these leaders that will ultimately create the impact in the world that is purposeful and will care about people, profit, and planet. Any final words, Vips?
Only that, it sounds all doom and gloom when we talked about it that way. But if you think about it, it's really just not that hard. Okay. I mean, what we're really saying is, identify and find the fabulous people first, nurture them along the way, because they will keep your attrition levels low. But if you can keep, they're going to give you value return anyway. Meet them where they need to be, and look for systems and structures that cultivate your best talent rather than hold them back because you're trying to do the same thing for everyone and you don't want to be seen to be showing favoritism to the people that are generating most of the value for your organization. I think we need to look at that a little bit more because, I think otherwise we systemically create mediocrity where the best people can move on easily. They're going to go and make their millions no matter what. So we should probably these things aren't that hard. I think they're just a little bit different relative to how we're grooved to thinking about them. And I think actually the current environment, COVID and social justice and civil unrest that we're going through is forcing a recalibration. I hope we can use this to recalibrate us to, I don't know, architecture 4.0, the right type of, what is the fabulous organization 4.0 that does seek to balance those things.
Yeah, I love it. All right, the Vicky challenge, Vips.
Go for it. Make sure it's optimistic though.
So not look for opportunities to suffer.
Yeah. That was just my tough love moment. You're supposed to make it all safe now.
All right. So for those of you that want to challenge yourself, you can look at moments of suffering to figure out where you can grow. But for everybody else, The challenge for this episode is to really think about the people in your organization and yourself, and where are the opportunities for more of that honest conversation and reflection. So spend 10 minutes each morning for the next week and really look at the people in your organization. And how many would you say are in that space of continual reinvention and growth? How many are in that mediocrity, just really settling place? And how many are that they really shouldn't be there? And then once you've done that assessment, be really honest about where you fall in and whether in 5 years' time, you pretty much want to be where you are today, plus or minus 5%, or if you want the hockey stick maneuver that's going to change the trajectory of where you end up in the world. And if you do, give us a call. And with that, be fabulous. Have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.